Hello, BookTube. Sorry to miss a day of video making yesterday. I was feeling under the weather, and I still am. But I didn't want to go another day without talking to my imaginary BookTube friends, so I thought I'd make one all-purpose bookish video rather than 5 all-purpose bookish videos. I'll just make one talking about the books in my life lately, and I'll leave timestamps down below for the particular part of the video that I'm actually, no, I won't. No, I won't. And you're a jerk if you want them. Right? This is a conversation with a friend, not an all-you-can-eat buffet at the Olive Garden. I'm not going to leave timestamps at all. If you're not interested in talking to me, then don't watch. Not that I would know how to leave timestamps, even if I wanted to. But we shouldn't encourage each other to dehumanize an already dehumaned process. So it's a beautiful day. It looks to me like Boston might have a chance of rain, maybe even a shower or two tomorrow. But today it's lovely. It's saturating, soppingly humid, but otherwise lovely. So we have a lot to go through that I'll just go through as best I can. I don't think I've done a portmanteau video like this in quite some time, so I might be a little rusty. We'll start with some periodicals. I subscribe to a whole bunch of periodicals, so I got a bunch of those. And the first two are square-bound glossy magazines that had, unfortunately, they had lots of interesting stuff in them, but unfortunately they had a disingenuous thread running through them that sort of soured the experience for me. The first was Architectural Digest, which I like as a magazine. The first half of it or more is very expensive ads for marble countertops or inlaid lighting fixtures or whatnot, things that are $50,000 a pop and that are for people who subscribe to Architectural Digest as a thing to shop from, not for normal people. And that tone, that this is Architectural Digest, but it's not really anything about how people actually live. It's not about actual homes. It's about disembodied theoretical architecture. That theme that unites a lot of the advertising often bothers me about the second half of the magazine, which tends to be house profiles. Because whether they've been prettied up by their owners or whether their owners never actually live there, they very seldom seem like real places where people live. Even though some of the features can be interesting. There were some features this time around in some of these houses that were interesting. The thing that was disingenuous, the disingenuous element running throughout here, involves the cover story, which is about the actor Nate Berkus and his husband and their children and their home. And we get, there's the happy family. We get the house that they have refurbished. Not a single book in sight, not even the hint that a book could be possible in the world. They simply do not read. But you have a marble kitchen island there, and a nice, raw wood fixture dining area where you can't buy good taste. This is a simple thing. That is the salient lesson from things like Architectural Digest, is that you can't buy good taste, and you can't hire it either. You have to have it. If you don't know how fatally mismatched those stupid Art Deco torture chamber chairs are with that table and the unfinished wood all around the room, if you don't know that, there's no one who's going to be able to tell you that. It's just the guests of yours, your guests who come over who do have taste are going to say, that ruins the room, doesn't it? But they're going to say it to themselves or in the car ride home. They're not going to say it to you. You have an incredibly overcrowded living room there. I don't know what these things are. They obviously aren't books. It's a nice enough arrangement, but can you imagine ruining it like that? Look at how they've ruined it. There's no floor space. You're bumping into things everywhere, and everywhere you go in that living room is the incredibly likely chance of spilling something onto a piece of furniture that costs more than your family makes in a year. So it's a nerve-wracking experience. It's clearly meant to be nerve-wracking, but I mean, not so bad. It's not so bad. I could see someone living in this place. Some of the choices are weird. We've seen this in Architectural Digest before. Imagine putting a bed in the middle of a room. Imagine doing that. You might say, well, you've got a closet on one side and a doorway on the other and windows on the front, so where else would you put it? I don't think it takes more than 2 seconds to answer that question, and it certainly isn't this. I'm going to put my bed in the middle of my room, and I'm going to put a screen around it. So in the winter, when I'm reading in bed, I cannot see it snowing. In the summer, when I'm reading in bed, I am not anywhere near the breezes that might come from an open window. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. But still, at least kinda, sorta accessible, but it was ruined. The duplicity element enters into it on the next page. This is often what you will see in the front of Architectural Digest. You will see extremely overpriced bijoux and house fixtures like this that you can buy. What are some of the prices on here? A footed dish for $337. Mid-century candlesticks that are certainly not mid-century. They were made yesterday in Taiwan. $85, I presume, a piece. And you might think, well, okay, so they put this late in the magazine. Why is that duplicitous? I don't know if you can make it out. They're all by Nate Berkus. He designed these things, and clearly struck a deal with Architectural Digest. You can do a feature on my home if you hawk my wares, which was kind of bad. I kind of didn't like it. In the next feature, we have a house that belongs mostly to Satan. This belongs mostly to Satan. He's the only person who could be comfortable there, although that is fairly mouthwatering as a marble bath goes. I would still prefer a window with a view, but maybe the view is not something you'd want looking in on you. But you get back to the Satan motif with the mirror in the bathroom. Isn't that a lovely detail? You've got a snake winding its way up the gilding of the mirror in the bathroom. Just in case Satan, who is, once again, see, this is the mirror. That's what it looks like. In case Satan, who I assume, again, is the owner of this apartment, gets lonesome for his days in Eden, he can always just have the snake on the bathroom mirror. Then we go to a house on Martha's Vineyard, which has been repurposed by a couple of people who have more money than they know what to do with, as you can tell, because they have a pet duck. And this house had some of the only really human details in the thing. That is a lovely mid-19th century living room arrangement. Still no books, not even the hint of a book, not even the hint that anyone in the house even knows what a book is, but a lovely arrangement. You and I, of course, would, if we encountered a room like this, I think we all know what we would do with it. We would absolutely fill it with books. Line every wall with books. A room is so inhospitable without them. But we have a couple of nice features here. This is a mouth-watering shower arrangement. Look at that. Oh my. Look at that. And also there was, this is a fairly nice solarium/day bed. As that arrangement goes, I, of course, would not make it look like that. The bed looks like you would be tortured on it. I would find a real bed to put there. I'm sure that the antique marts on the vineyard would provide one, and the workers to bring it in and make sure that it fits. And I wouldn't assign it like that. I wouldn't put it where it is. I would jut it out diagonally from one of those corners, preferably the one under this beam, so that you've got light on either side and your view is not obstructed. Whoever is laying in this daybed can't see anything over here. Why would you do that? Well, it's not as bad as putting a bed in the middle of a bedroom, but it's a second cousin once removed. But still, a fairly nice thing, and also a classic vineyard thing, or Cape Cod just in general, is showering or bathing outside. It's a big vineyard thing. Really, really, more. If you've never done it, it's really more enjoyable than it sounds. But that was basically it for this Architectural Digest. It was mostly ads, and I was a little bit disappointed to see ads working their way even into a house profile, because somebody is selling his own derivative designs. And then the other square-bound glossy magazine that had a bit of duplicitousness in it was Men's Health, which I don't quite know why I get Men's Health. I think it was probably a year-long subscription, or maybe even a special deal 2-year-long subscription was $10. So I just wrote a check and figured, there's bound to be enough stray elements of interest in all of those issues to be worth $10. And I'm not griping. Probably there is. Like, for instance, this is the current issue of Men's Health. That 50-year-old on the cover is Zac Efron, the 30-something star of High School Musical just a few years ago. And this has food guides, one-page food guides. It has one-page tech guides, one-page stuff, items for a better sleep, that sort of thing. They have features like this in every issue, and I admit a lot of these things, these little one-page issues, I find very interesting. I still think there's a perfect magazine out there that I don't know about, but that does exist, and that I should just subscribe to. But the big newsstand here in Boston, where I could go and browse and look for such a thing, is gone. It was part of the big Barnes & Noble in the Prudential Center that closed. So there isn't anything like that anymore that I know. Nothing that even comes close. I could go to Trident Bookstore on Newbury Street. They have a newsstand of a kind. But what I really want is a whole magazine of things like that, of pages noting, describing, maybe ranking, all kinds of items like that. Mainly tech, I admit, mainly tech, a kind of tech market magazine. Maybe it's Consumer Reports, but the few times I've tried them, they weren't doing it the way I want. So maybe I just have to put up with pages like that in magazines like this. But of course, the duplicity in this comes from the article about Zac Efron. I should go right to it here so that I can give credit where it's due, if credit is what we're talking about here. The article is by Lauren Larson, with illustrations by Ture Lillegraven, and the illustrations are all careful to show Zac Efron being athletic, doing all sorts of, Hunger Games athletic things. And the article mentions that he says he has 10 t-shirts, 5 pairs of workout shorts, a couple of pants, a couple of sweatshirts, and 2 Lululemon shorts and hoodie tracksuits that he wears all the time. And that's pretty much it. So he's minimalist. And if you believe that, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. He also talks at different points in this article about his incredible health regime, about cold water bathing, and what was the other one? Full half-hour training before and a full half-hour before bed. He champions stretching, self-massage. I live attached to a Theragun. He mentions ice-cold bathing. At nowhere in the article does he mention cupping, which is one of the completely fraudulent pseudosciences that all of the pretty boy fake athletes in Hollywood are currently in love with. It's kind of swept through the fitness dude bro YouTuber circuit as well. So they'll show on Instagram, they'll show pictures of themselves at the gym with big red circles on their back, like they've been attacked by a squid. No science to it at all. It's just pure pseudoscience. They might as well be bleeding themselves with leeches. But they all do it, and there's a good reason why. There's a good reason why they do that, and it's not even hinted at in this article. Which is that they think that if these young guys, these young weightlifter Hollywood stars, the fitness influencers, the YouTube gym dude bros and all of them, they all think that if they indulge in all of these fads, then they can smoke. That the fads will compensate for the fact that right before his interview, Zac Efron smoked a foot-long cigar. He reeked of it when Lauren sat down to talk with him during their one and only face-to-face meeting at a restaurant. And the instant he was done eating, he lit up another one, right in front of her. She's writing a brief for Men's Health. She's probably getting a good chunk of money, $7,000, $8,000 for an article like this, for the cover. So she's not going to mention anything like that. Instead, the whole article is going to show him doing all sorts of athletic-y type things. The article is certainly not going to portray him as having the lung capacity of a small child and reeking like an old man. They're not going to do that, even though that is true. And these young fitness fakers, they all do this for the same reason, because they think that it's true. They think that they're striking some sort of balance. If they do these quack pseudoscience health approaches and also go to the gym under the heavy lashing of a personal trainer, Zac Efron pays his own personal trainer $910,000 a year. That's a lot of motivation that he doesn't have to have. Or if you don't have that kind of money to throw around, a lot of the fitness influencers will just have, a gigantic cup of amphetamines. They're pre-workout. That is gray market North Korean amphetamines. They don't have any idea what's in the stuff. Even the ones who market their own don't have any idea what's in it. All they know is that, as several of them have put it over the years, it makes their head feel like it's on fire. And without that turbo boost, some of this stuff is, before the FDA shuts it down, it's called turbo boost. Without that, they don't exercise at all. They don't go to the gym, none of this rise and grind crap. And that is where the balance falls apart. If you've got a $910,000 a year personal trainer, if you've got a bucket of powdered amphetamines that you could take before you go to the gym every day, that's one thing. But that's a lot of effort. That's a lot of effort. The personal trainer might get fired, might say the wrong thing to your personal assistant or whatever. The pre-workout might get shut down by the FDA, and before you can find another one, you're stuck with the dilemma of maybe weightlifting because you want to, instead of because you're high on drugs. Those things all take a lot of effort. But drug addiction doesn't take any effort at all. In fact, it relies on the fact that it's effortless. You roll out of bed in the morning, you're thinking, oh, I'd better call my trainer and make him earn his daily pay to get me to the gym, and it's going to be awful, it's going to feel awful, it's going to take a long time, I'm going to feel gross before, during, and after. Or I could just smoke right now. And then when I'm done, I could do it again. And then when I'm done, I could do it again. And that everyday seduction wins out. That's plain and simple. It just wins out over any kind of fitness regime. In other words, there's no way to have both, and they all think they can. So that was, the fact that the interviewer here for this piece certainly knows that firsthand. Spend any amount of time with Zac Efron, and you will certainly know that firsthand. And didn't mention it in an article because the article is skewed for fitness dude bros, for Wall Street fitness dude bros who don't have time to go to the gym and want to rationalize the fact that they go out every 20 minutes from bilking senior citizens to smoke on the sidewalk. That's what Men's Health is for. It's not for the athlete, the athletically inclined. It's for people who wish they were or who think they are. So that was a little bit, those two things, that, Architectural Digest hawking the wares of some actor, and Men's Health doing what it always does. I'm not saying this is an isolated case for Men's Health. It's just, and I'm not blaming the freelancer either. You write what your market wants, but even so, you don't get to look that way or sound the way he does, unless you're a massive drug addict, and that's not healthy. So to be the cover model for Men's Health, but anyway, fortunately, the final periodical never contains any duplicity. That is the TLS, the London Times Literary Supplement, the greatest literary review in the English-speaking world, which has back-to-back big reviews here that were really of interest to me. They review, Andrew Motion reviews Nights of Plague by Orhan Pamuk and gives it a nice, generous link. And even more generous than that, here, let me show it to you. Edmund Gordon reviews Lessons by Ian McEwan. Here's a whole 2-page spread. And I haven't yet really sat down with Nights of Plague, but I read Lessons. And it bugged me. And it didn't bug me in a simple way or in a reductive way. It bugged me in the way that I like books to bug me. Ian McEwan doesn't always do that for me. This, I'm going to be going back to this book. So I was glad to see it get a nice, long, thoughtful review. Very, very nice. So those were the periodicals. We're just going to forge on here. I don't know how long this video will be, but there won't be any others today. So after periodicals, let's talk about, what are we going to talk about next? How about reading events? I'm part of a bunch of reading events for September. So we can do those. I've got the iPad mini here. Like, for instance, there's Dick Timber, which was created by Mark, Book Time with Elvis, and Sean Standfast, and Michael K. Vaughan and I are all co-hosts for an event in September celebrating Private Eyes, celebrating House Dicks, Gumshoes. I view it as kind of an adjunct to March Mystery Madness, which is still a long way off. I wish March Mystery Madness happened every week. I read mysteries all the time, dearly, dearly love them. And I've been having a great Dictember. I've been having a lot of fun doing. Mostly, I admit, uh, rereading, more rereading than groundbreaking reading, but still really enjoying it. And today's the one that I read last night that I'm talking about today, just briefly, uh, is a reread from an author I just love. This is P.D. James, An Unsuitable Job for a Woman, the first Claudia Gray novel. The lovely old plastic manual portable typewriter. I used to have one of those. It looked almost identical to that, right down to the red button there on the side. I used to have one of those and used it a lot, and it was what we considered portable technology. I had my big manual typewriter that sat on my desk, never went anywhere. It has a case, my manual typewriter. It has a case, and the case has metal hinges on all four corners, so that when you put the typewriter in to the case, you can lock it in place. Then you close the big cover over it, and that locks as well. And it does have a handle. You could carry that thing around, but these little slimline things, they weighed almost nothing. And they had a case with a handle built right in. I used to bring mine everywhere. And anyway, that's a little bit of a nostalgic distraction. I love this author. I just do. There's something about P.D. James's register as an author that I just love. It was whenever you love an author like this, when every new book is something that you're just looking forward to, and in some way or another it pleases you, almost no duds. When I have an author like that, where I'm just reading their material and I'm really liking it, if you're a working hack, if you're an all-purpose Old Bailey hack, the last thing in the world you want to do if you have an author like that is a thing that I was actually called upon to do with this author, which is write their obituary. It's kind of a bittersweet sort of nail in the coffin, no pun intended, to loving an author like this, is that you might be called upon to write their obituary. But the books continue. That's the whole point of being a writer. And this is just wonderful. It's just wonderful. I see the mannerisms in it that could bother a reader. Claudia Gray is part of a ramshackle, very low-key, very unprosperous private eye firm that she was part of, along with an older retired ex-cop who dies and leaves the whole firm to her. And when you look at the title of this thing, you might think that the story is about misogyny and prejudice, that people don't think that being a private eye is a suitable job for a woman, that sort of thing. And that's true. That runs throughout here. She encounters a case where a young man is found dead, obviously of suicide. His very wealthy and sort of grief-stunned father hires her to investigate it. And of course, as you know, if you read mystery stories, she finds out there's more to it than that, and that it might not have been suicide at all. I don't want to spoil the novel, but she stumbles onto a much deeper and more complex story. And it's not just that in the course of this investigation, she encounters the kind of offhand sexism that is mentioned in the title. She does. Not as much of it as you might think, considering this was written 50 years ago, but she does. But with this author, there's always something more going on. And that's true in this case as well, because it isn't long that you're reading this book. This is my, I don't know, 5th reread. It isn't long when you're reading this book before you start to think, well, Claudia is unsuitable for the job. It's an unsuitable job for a woman. It's also an unsuitable job for this woman. She's easily distractible. Her mind is not the kind of razor-sharp logic machine that you would expect of a protagonist in whodunit. It's not so much prevalent in this book, but in other books, it's amazing that she solves anything at all. It actually is kind of amazing in this book as well. I love it. Absolutely love it. P.D. James has the same predilection as Elizabeth George for interspersing single lines of dialogue in the same 5-minute conversation with pages of prose. And you just have to get used to that. That's all. If you don't, if you say, okay, well, she just asked someone, did anyone come into the room in between when the person hanged himself and when the police first got here? She asked that question, and in Janet Ivanovich novel, the next line would be the answer to that question. But in a P.D. James novel, it's entirely likely that will spark 2 pages of reverie on the part of the main character or the author, and before you get the answer that would have happened a second later. And you just have to get used to that. If you don't, you're going to miss a lot. You're going to miss a lot that's really good. It's a small sacrifice to ask, to accustom yourself to an author's tics, to an author's particular habits. An author as good as P.D. James is allowed to have tics. In other words, this is all a tortured way of saying I absolutely love this. I thought it was just fantastic. To read it over again was just fantastic. And that was Dick Timber. But then I'm also involved in Autumn Amour, which is an event created by the Bookish Bryants designed to celebrate the genre of romance throughout the month of September. Now, I read, again, like with mysteries, I read a lot of romances all the time. It's a genre that I very much love. And we have, for Autumn Amour, broken up the weeks into vague categories, past and present, haves and have-nots, that sort of thing, spicy or nice, that sort of thing. One category that never crossed anybody's mind to include for Autumn Amour, nevertheless manages to, shall we say, squirm its way into my reading, and that is tentacle romance. Now, I'm not going to explain, I don't think I could, what tentacle romance actually is. I tried explaining the Omegaverse to people, and not only did I fail, but you weren't happy that I even made you know that it existed. And I don't want to go through that again with tentacle romance. Let's just say it's a thriving sub-basement of romance. It was only a matter of time until it entered my Autumn Amour reading experience. I read this, all wrapped up. You thought it was metaphorical tentacles, didn't you? No, it's not. It's real tentacle. This is edited by Elizabeth Hyder. Is that right? Hyder. And it's an anthology. A whole bunch of different authors writing a whole bunch of different kinds of tentacle romance, depending on what they want to do. You might be asking, what on earth? Why would anyone... Tentacles are gross. Why would anyone make that a kind of romance? The romance element is often not prevalent in tentacle stories. God, what am I getting into? I'm not up for this. The romance element is often not prevalent. Instead, there's another element that's prevalent, and the explanation for why tentacles is pretty easy. Tentacles can get just about anywhere. This is an anthology. The things range all over the map. And I'm not talking about the anthology. I'm talking about one story in here. It's called Ground Mission by Layla Hunter. And it's science fiction. It's two podmates who are sort of colonial marines. You can picture them colonial marines from the Alien movies, who are on a mission they are on a part of a mission to reclaim an alien world that has gone silent. It had a human colony, and that human colony has gone silent. And so a whole group of people are being dropped off. A whole bunch of podmates, 2 people at a time, are being dropped off on different parts of one continent in order to figure out what's going on. And we follow 2 podmates who come out of cryogenic suspension in the long trip between the stars. They come out of cryogenic suspension. We get to meet them just briefly. They've been at this a long time. They've lost track of time, and they've lost track of the duration of their own contracts because of all the time they spend in hypersleep, in cryosleep. And they've been genetically modified. They're genetically modified pretty much with every mission. Souped up strength in one of them, souped up eyesight, better tactical awareness, better nerve and reflexes, different skin. They're still human, but not quite entirely. And they aren't awake when they're modified per mission. That's done while they're in cryosleep. So they really do feel. I mean, the 2 of them put a really good spin on it, but their life is not really their own. And they are lovers. The 2 of them, as we're told, often happens with podmates. And they are put down on one part of this jungly, humid planet, and quickly get a radio transmission from another pod group that the pod group has encountered hostile aliens on the world. And that maybe the explanation for what happened to the dead human colonies is there are hostile aliens on this world. And no sooner do they get that warning, they encounter some of their own. These big tentacled creatures that emit almost no heat signature. And They fend them off, and then they find an abandoned part of the human colony, walls, roofs, old equipment, that sort of thing. They figure it's a perfect place to hole up, just temporarily, while they contact their superiors to let them know we have indeed found something. Not only have we made alien contact, but we found the remnants of a habitation, which is a big deal. It's a huge haystack. They're looking for needles, and they found one. And while they're there with hostile aliens outside and night coming on and who knows what lurking inside this installation, they still manage to get it on. they can't keep their hands off each other. Then they clean off and resume their mission. And when they resume their mission, they're attacked by more aliens, and one of them bites one of the two podmates before the alien is killed. All the aliens are killed. But the podmate has been bitten, and the bite doesn't look good. It looks infected. They retreat back to the shelter to wait for backup, to wait for help to arrive. And during the course of the nighttime, while they're waiting, tentacles start to spring out of the bite. And they seem to be able to move at the conscious command of the bitten podmate. He doesn't feel good, but he's still conscious, and he's still aware of his surroundings, and he can sort of move these tentacles at will. And he's really frightened. Both of them are. They're not sure what things will be like when morning comes. They're not sure how long it'll take for help to arrive. And yet, despite all of that, they get it on again. And they do it this time with the help of tentacles. Youth. And it allows Layla Hunter to just let go. To just let go in terms of writing sex scenes. And that was okay. I mean, I thought the story was kind of interesting. It was better done than it needed to be. I don't mean that it sounds so condescending, but it didn't need to be this to be rock solid science fiction. Instead, it kind of was. And then at the ending, the two of them are indeed rescued the next morning, and the ending, I don't think there's any chance you're ever going to find this book and read that particular story, Ground Mission. But the ending is genuinely touching. It was genuinely well done. Wasn't expecting that at all. To put it mildly, that it was a little bit out of place with a lot of the other stories in this anthology. So, tentacle romance was my entry for Autumn Amour. Now, for the other event that I'm in, Book Trek 2022, which was created by Vin at Revenant Reads, and we're reading Star Trek fiction. September is supposed to be dedicated to Trek fiction that we're not familiar with. Trek fiction especially generated or based on new Trek, Alex Kurtzman Trek. And I've been having, it's just been a desert. It's also, there's not much of it, and what I've read of it is so bad. A few exceptions here and there, but even the exceptions manage to shoot themselves in the tentacle. So I mentioned the other day that I was going maybe to go afield and look at sites like fanfiction.net and see what people are writing, what ordinary people, non-contracted writers are writing about Star Trek Discovery. And I did that. I went to fanfiction.net and read all the Star Trek Discovery stuff that was on there. None of it was any good, but you don't go to fanfiction for good fiction. If you find it, send up a flare, because there's not that much of it. It's fan fiction. It's made for other fans. Lots and lots of people who post stories on fanfiction.net will earnestly say that they would love constructive criticism, and every time I have ever made it, they have been genuinely grateful. But that's not really what it's for. It's really just to play around with other people's ideas. And like I mentioned in a Sexy Steve stream just the other day, it was sort of telling to me how many Star Trek Discovery stories on fanfiction.net call themselves AU, alternate universe, because they cannot write effectively in the Discovery universe. A lot of the stories are just saying, I'm going to fix all of the irregularities, all of the continuity breaks in Star Trek Discovery to make it align more with original Trek and Strange New Worlds. It very purposely doesn't align with anything. It doesn't look like it belongs in its place in the Roddenberry timeline. I didn't find any of those stories that were particularly good, and I also succumbed. I succumbed to the number one danger of fanfiction.net, which is distraction. There are hundreds of thousands of stories on fanfiction.net. No matter what you like, no matter what thing you like, an anime, a comic book, TV show that was canceled in one half of one season, a movie series, a book series, no matter what you like, you will find stories that people have written playing in that universe, no matter what. I'm going to go back, but I don't think I'm going to go back for Star Trek Discovery. I think next time I want to go back to books for a book trek. I don't want to just give up and go to fan fiction. But I think when I go back, I will look for Star Trek Lower Decks, Star Trek Prodigy, maybe Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I'm sure there are plenty of those that are on there already. And I'm pretty sure there's also a Star Trek Just Other, which is basically September of book trek. It's book trek September is anything that's not Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. So Star Trek Other, who knows what'll be in there? It'll be worth exploring, and I'll come back and report. Then, as long as we're speaking about, at least tangentially, TV shows, and especially failed TV shows like Star Trek Discovery, we might as well talk for a little bit about the elephant in the room, which is Amazon's The Rings of Power, which is, I've now, like everyone else in the world, I've watched 3 episodes of it. It's astonishingly bad. Just astonishingly bad. In every way. Each episode cost $70 million. For that kind of money, you could have hired better actors and actresses than the ones you did. I don't understand it. They had to know that this is the most expensive TV show that's ever been mounted. They had to know that all eyes would be on it. You'd think the casting sessions would be extensive. They can't have been. Like a lot of other people who've been watching the show, I find it extra ironic that the most insufferable member of the cast did a whole bunch of ground-softening interviews ahead of time before the show showed up, and the most insufferable of all of them was Sophie Nomvet, who plays Queen Disa, a dwarf woman. The first, as she hilariously put it, dwarf of color in Tolkien. And she was spouting woke Twitter speak like that every time someone put a microphone in her face prior to The Rings of Power. So I think, like a lot of other people, I was sort of expecting that she would, by natural law, be the worst thing in it. She's the best thing in it. I want more of her. She's the only thing in the show that I wanted more of. All the rest of it is just so boring. The actors are just not up to the task. They can't sell the material. Even if the material were good, they couldn't do it. And the material is terrible. But I'm not talking just about that. The special effects are bad. Can you imagine? Where is that money going? Where is $70 million an episode going if it's not going to special effects? The special effects are bad. They take you out of the story almost always. They do. Anyway, I will talk more about The Rings of Power when I feel a little more up to it. But The Rings of Power is based on the appendices to The Lord of the Rings. It's not based on The Lord of the Rings. It's not based on the Silmarillion. It's based on the appendices to The Lord of the Rings. So I was just incredibly tempted after the first 2 episodes to just go back and read the appendices, which don't have any real narrative in them. They're meant to be just extended footnotes to the action that happens in Lord of the Rings. There are some narratives buried in them. After the 3rd episode, I just went back and went to the appendices at the end of The Return of the King, is where the appendices are. Just about that much space. I went back to them. They have all sorts of family trees and whatnot, stuff that you couldn't adapt in a million years. But when I reread the appendices from front to back of them, just the little length of them, and realized how many stories there are in here that you could use without doing any of the dramatic mistakes and missteps that Rings of Power has done. It's just unbearable to watch. I will continue to watch it, but it's unbearable. It's boring and convoluted. It's hectoring and condescending. It's incredibly disrespectful to the lore that is its only reason for existing. If you made a fantasy story with these characters and took Tolkien's name off it, no one would watch this. And the showrunners know that. Amazon knows that. Jeff Bezos knows that. So you would think that would engender a little bit of respect for the material, but no, almost not at all. It makes me shudder to think what Amazon's The Lord of the Rings will be when Jeff Bezos gets the rights to The Lord of the Rings. I shudder to think what will happen. If this idea is not driven out of the marketplace, I don't even want to think about it. But I reread the appendices, which was enjoyable. And then when I was done rereading the appendices, I moved on to the Silmarillion. This is my ancient stripped cover paperback of the Silmarillion. And I didn't go back to the Silmarillion has a whole bunch of stuff. Or the large chunk of the book is set in the Second Age, which is the setting for the Rings of Power, the age before the age that ends with Lord of the Rings. I didn't read any of that. Instead, I went to one of the most remarkable things I know of in literature. There's a chapter uh, at the end of the Silmarillion called The Rings of Power and the Third Age. Just about 40 or 50 pages where Tolkien tells the story of the Lord of the Rings in 40 or 50 pages with a lot of dramatic beauty, but a totally 35,000 foot perspective. He's not in on the story at all, barely links you with any names, the friend, all the stuff that you can think of from Lord of the Rings. The heroic sacrifice of Frodo, the friendly banter between Gimli and Legolas, the querulous kind of quasi-humanity of Gandalf. All that is missing from this. This is how an ancient elf scribe in Rivendell would tell this story, who had not been there and who was not directly involved and doesn't want to tell any kind of a humanly relatable story. It's utterly remarkable. I can't read The Rings of Power in the Third Age enough. Every time I read it, I'm struck by how remarkable it is and how remarkable it would be if we had this from other authors about their own works. So I went and reread that. It's not really important. It's certainly, I mean, it doesn't connect with Rings of Power, which is all about the Second Age. But it did take the sting out of the third episode of Rings of Power, which was just an unimaginable mess. Just an unimaginable mess. These are gigantic, towering Tolkien characters. Elendil, Isildur, Ar-Pharazôn, the Mad King who eventually is suborned into bringing about the end of Numenor. It's a fantastic story where he is seduced into basically devil worship by a very seemly, smooth-talking stranger who is Sauron. The show drove me to these things. Probably the show will drive me to them again. But that was some of the reading that I did. I also reread this, Mark Anderson's Shakespeare by Another Name. I found this hardcover with a library dust jacket at the Brattle. It's Anderson's biography of Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, who he says wrote the plays of Shakespeare. And I read it again. I just could not help myself. I love this sort of thing. I love it as a biography of the Earl of Oxford, and it's also quite adroit at painting the broader picture in which Oxford lives. It's not just, I mean, a shelf of Shakespeare conspiracy theory books will often not have much along those lines. They will stick strictly to the problems with the text. This is much more than that. I was struck all over again about how sumptuous it is, how much more than just a crackpot conspiracy theory book it is. Because of the particular dates of the Earl of Oxford, if you're not going to go out just whole hog conspiracy theory and say that the Earl of Oxford didn't die when we think he did, and Anderson doesn't want to do that, if you're going to say that when he died, he was dead, then you've got a problem, because that doesn't line up with the timing of Shakespeare's plays. So what you have to do, and what Anderson tries to do, but he doesn't do it as much as later scholars have done, is attack the dating of Shakespeare's plays. You pretty much have to. If you want Marlowe or Oxford to be candidates for the authorship of Shakespeare's plays, and with Oxford, it's so tempting. The events of his life are mirrored over and over and over and over again in Shakespeare's plays in a way that beggars coincidence. There's just no way that it could be a coincidence. It could be that Shakespeare used those stories, which may have been known to some people, as fodder for his plays. It could be that maybe he was friends with Oxford, and that there was a running joke that I will use another story from your life. But if that isn't it, then if you're going to use a candidate like Marlowe or Oxford, you have to attack the timing of Shakespeare's plays. You have to attack the publication order, the dating of the plays, or it won't work. So I always find that fascinating. Interesting, like I mentioned, with these kinds of conspiracy things, no matter how outlandish the theory, it makes you think about how you know what you know about history. And that's always fun. I always love that. And then we're going to wrap up here. I'll do some quickfire books to finish up. Sorry about this. We'll do more videos as soon as I can. I've got 3 books that I want to show you. The first is by Catherine Rundell. We've seen it already. This is Super Infinite, her book on John Donne. I worried about this. I worried that it was going to be John Green writes John Donne's biography, and it kind of was. I mean, you're not 20 pages into this book before Rundell is referring to John Donne's superpowers. So, I mean, there have been serious, very serious, and incredibly readable biographies of Donne. You're not going to get that in this. Fairly early on you're not. You don't. It's passionate, and it is knowledgeable about Donne. Maybe not so much about his poems. The actual metricality, the actual nuts and bolts of what he's doing in his poems, which is a big detraction. No one's expecting that you have to be as good a poet as Donne to write a biography of Donne, since there aren't any better poets than Donne. But you want to have more knowledge of what Donne is doing in his own art than Rundell has in this book. But if you overlook that, and that's possible to overlook, this is very, very energetic. Not quite sure. I know this is a very cliche thing for a critic to ask, but I'm not quite sure who this book is for. If you've read a biography of John Donne, or more than one, or you're really familiar with his poetry, there's a really good, heavily annotated edition of his poetry. Don't at the moment remember the editor's name. One of you can probably remind me of it. You'll know the one I'm talking about. Big, thick thing it was in a paperback for a long time, 50 years ago. That has an introduction. It has a preface. It has 300 pages of tightly written notes. You will know everything there is to know about John Donne and his artwork when you're done with that volume. I can't help but think that Catherine Rundell read that volume and just chose to leave a lot of that out. This won't compete with that or with any of the serious biographies of Donne. I found it interesting, but I'm not quite sure if you've read those things, if you've read those biographies or those scholarly editions of the complete poetry. I don't know what you'd get out of Super Infinite. I guess I'm still trying to pin down what I got out of it, except maybe imagining an audience that would really like it. Then the next book that we'll do is this one. We saw this on this channel as well, Chris Thorogood, Chasing Plants. This is wonderful. It was just wonderful. It was a lot better than I expected. It's the main claim to fame here is the artwork. There's artwork all throughout, black and white and color. And all the artwork is by the author. Yeah, there we go. That was a color one. And it's all really good. Very, very, very much repays just staring at the details of the work. It's not quick field sketches. It's really, really good stuff. Very, very memorable plant painting. It's not easy to do. And that would have been enough. That would have been enough for me to like the book and maybe even to recommend it to you, although I think this is expensive. No, this is $30. $30 for an extra heavy hardcover full of black and white and color original artwork is not, in our current market, a lot. But I would have been able to recommend it for that anyway, but I can recommend it even more because he's such an engaging writer. Do you want to get down here, baby? Here, let me. Well, I'm almost done, little girl. Here, come on. He's such an engaging writer that this could have had one thing that I was thinking when I was like 100 pages into it is that this could have no illustrations at all. I would still be reading it just as eagerly. It's really, really well done. I never would have thought that I would encounter that about plants, but that goes to show you that's why I love my job. And then we'll finish up with this, Anne Cleves. This is a new Vera Stanhope novel, Rising Tide. This comes out in September. I don't have a date for it, but this was utterly delightful. In fact, I thought it had a lot more snap and energy than the last few Vera Stanhope books I've read. It really did. When something has been so winningly adapted for TV, the mark of a success for a novel, a new novel about that property, that franchise, will be if it makes you forget the adaptation and just sucks you back into the wonder, the world of the books. And this did, completely. About a group of friends who, repair to the same exotic location once a year, and when one of them turns up dead, they're all natural suspects, and they're all very different from each other, all in their own way eminently suspectable. And the star of the show is the police inspector, Vera Stanhope. She is such a wonderfully unchanging character. She's surrounded by people who try to humanize her. All of her colleagues try to humanize her, and we get to know them better and better with every book. And even the circumstances always try to humanize her, but really she is a murder-solving machine. She's not inhuman, but it's the whole focus of her world. There's a hilarious toss-off line in here that she really had no patience for small talk unless it involved murder. And the author's snide little asides poking fun at her own character are all throughout the book and are wonderful. That's the last book that I want to recommend here, also for March Mystery Madness. Is that although by the time March Mystery Madness comes along, Rising Tide will probably be in paperback. But I wanted to recommend it. It's in your bookstores now. If you're lucky enough to have a bookstore, then it's in your bookstores now, and it's worth it. It really is. And that's it. That is our kind of Monday reading for you. 50 minutes. Oh, God help us. Well, better 50 minutes than 50 minutes. So I'm going to wrap this up. But that's a smattering of the reading that I've done and what I've been thinking about it. I will be back as soon as I can. Thank you, BookTube.